Good morning, gardening friends. It's now March 12th at about 8:45, and today I'm going to be building a couple more boxes to add to the inner ring. And I still got to clean up the patio and such, but I wanted to give you an update, a general update on how things are looking around here. So let's take a look. So the plants on the curve are doing okay. I've got a few sprouts here and there. It's not all filled out yet, but it's only been a couple of weeks really. With the rain kind of slowing things down by about a week, we're doing okay. I kind of wish I could see a few more little sprouts, but we're getting there. The Swiss chard is doing lovely as always, and over in the next planter over on the left there, I've got those sprouts are starting to pop up a bit. The corner planter is starting to develop a bit. I don't know how well you can see, and especially with that light in the way, but I've got the sprouts that were in there are getting bigger and bigger. It looks like it's mostly the marigold that is coming to life in there, but the petunias that are already there are doing okay, and the geranium is holding up. Unfortunately, the lone tomato plant that I had left over seems to have pretty much given up the ghost at this point. I did plant some seeds in there last week, and we'll see if they germinate. But the sad news is the one that I had sitting in this planter, which was right here, has pretty much died. The one that had germinated. So I may end up just buying live plants. I'll give it a little bit longer and we'll see what happens. This isn't exactly gardening, but last week I did paint the table just to make sure we kind of had a pop of color and freshened it up a bit. And the chairs I kind of restored. If you look around on my channel, you'll see I've got a video that I posted last weekend along with the last episode that shows how I restored those chairs, and that seems to have worked out pretty nicely. Out here in the south courtyard, we've got these plants which are doing quite nicely. The nasturtiums have really taken off. I'm enjoying watching all that color. The white pot and the bulbs are doing okay. The bulbs really haven't developed too much more since I first noticed that they had popped. But the white pot's doing better. Let me go closer. I hope you can see we've got morning glories in there. We got something in the middle which was growing already, and it may be a little hard to see, but let's say right between those two morning glories on the sort of to the right, and a little, if you go center between the two and then a little bit to the right and down, you'll see there's a couple more sprouts in there. I'm not sure what those are because they're a little too young to tell, but we've got something growing. That's a good thing. And here's an updated shot of the artichoke plants. It really looks like it's basically just put an offshoot off, and that's doing better than the original. The petunias are doing nicely. Oh, and one other thing. The first of the zinnias has developed here, so that makes me happy on the zinnias. This is the second with the marigold in front, and right after I finished shooting the last episode, I transplanted this, mainly because I'm kind of rearranging my pots, but that leads me to show you one other thing. Here is one of the trees I have on either side of the exercise room, and that's been sitting in a smaller pot and it was seriously root bound, but I've transplanted it into a larger bucket, and in this case this is actually just a nursery pot. But what I did was I gave it the same treatment as I gave the chairs to try and make it look a little better, and that seems to have succeeded. Let me show you how that looks in complementing the other one. Okay, it may be a little too early in the morning with the way the light is around here to get you a really good shot, but hopefully you can see there's two pots roughly the same size, both black, so I think that just looks better than it did before. I'll get you another shot sometime later in the week. Okay, this is an odd sort of shot. This is outside the patio wall and behind some of the plants, but as it turned out, some of my squash plants were getting large and growing back onto the patio where they're not going to get much for sun. Even behind these plants, I think it's going to get more sun, so I kind of moved the entire vine out and set up this little trellis that I still had left over from something else last year. I'm kind of hoping it'll grow onto it and work its way over sort of towards us. There's another one off in the distance which you probably can't see all too well. It's developing fruit and it's dropping over. I may end up actually cutting off one of the branches just so it doesn't get tangled up in this pricker bush, but we'll see. The hanging plants behind the pool shed are doing surprisingly well. I've got more than just sprouts, but I'm doing pretty good on, actually, I think all 4 of them. So that's good. Lots of sprouts here and here on the pergola. That's making me happy. The plants are starting to get almost tall enough. Maybe another couple of weeks they'll start actually climbing. And finally, we have the brown pot in the north courtyard. Which has, well, let's see, there's a morning glory in there. I think there's a tiny little grass-like thing growing up in there. I'm not sure. But basically everything's still alive. The black-eyed Susan is just still going crazy and strong. So I'm happy with that. We'll see what else develops here. And I think that's it for today's update. Aside from me building some boxes, we'll see if anything else develops today. Good afternoon, gardening friends. It's now March 15th, Saturday, at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I have a bit of a confession to make. This week I've been dealing with a lot of people that have been quite impatient, and I think one of the results is I've become a little bit impatient. So let me show you what I've done. First of all, we have the tomatoes. I've been waiting for sprouts for a while, and even the rain doesn't really explain why it's taking so long for things to germinate. The one that did germinate in the patio tomato box, which is the one on the right, that one died like the next day. I think it just got baked in the sun, so I think there's kind of a water problem. I'm not putting enough water on, maybe, but here's what I've done. Yep, I went out and bought a couple of plants. Actually managed to find yellow pear and patio tomato, and actually the home center had them on sale for 2 for $5, so it was a decent deal that I happened to spot, and it just sort of, the timing was right. So, oh, and I think I failed to mention on the yellow pear on the left there, the plant that was there was just dead, so I finally pulled it. That was kind of the last straw, so I'm going to go ahead and plant these. I'm going to leave the seeds that are already in there, and if they happen to grow, great, we'll have extra plants, we'll figure out what to do with that. But now I can finally get to my tomatoes going and probably save myself at least a couple of months in growing. Meanwhile, we've got the south courtyard and the plants up on the wall, or the pots up on the wall, and I did a couple of things up on the wall. Let me show you. I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier in the week when I did that update, but at one point I was looking at some stuff I had on the shelf, and I was just kind of curious. If you look at the second pot from the left there, you'd notice a bunch of blue in there. That's not actually a painted pot. That's something called crystal soil. And let me see if I can get this in picture here, so you can kind of see. It's just this kind of, it's kind of like a plastic substance, or I don't even know what it's made of exactly, but it soaks up water and grows to like 100 or more times its size. I mean, these things are like the size of BBs to start with. So I just kind of filled it in and put a bunch of water. I barely put any of it in there, and then put a bunch of water in, and it just grew. So I'm just kind of playing with it. It was just kind of a frustrating week, and it was something to play with. Meanwhile, I got a couple of plants in the 4th and 5th pot. In that first pot, I've got Snapdragon, and in the pot beyond it, I've got something called Persian Buttercup. These were both at the home center on the $1 rack. They were deeply, deeply discounted, and I just couldn't pass it up. I said, this is a chance to actually get flowers up on the wall here really quickly. I didn't have to invest in the soil, I didn't have to plant the seeds, I didn't have to wait. Now the plants are kind of sickly, I've cut off all the dead stuff, and I'm kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. Meanwhile, today I went back to the home center and I picked up another Persian buttercup and figured I could just put it right here. You can see that's a pretty simple way to quickly fill up a pot. I'm not even going to put soil in there. I'm going to make sure it gets a little bit of water tonight. I'm trying to figure out the watering requirements on the Persian buttercup, and most of my sources that I usually go to don't have much information, so I don't want to overwater it. But what I will do with this one is I'll go ahead and cut off the dead stuff and see if I can get it to bounce back. If not, I only spent $1 on it, and at least for a couple of days we're going to have something nice up on the wall. Meanwhile, if you're a regular viewer, you'll remember that the very end of last year, end of December, I actually planted some bulbs in a couple of these pots. Well, as it turns out, that Persian buttercup I was just showing you is actually also called ranunculus, which is one of the 3 types of bulbs I planted in there. So it's an interesting sort of coincidence, and we'll see if the bulbs I planted actually turn into the flowers that you saw on the wall. Also, in the white pot next to it, I've got a couple of these plants that I kept thinking were zinnia, although they had variegated color to them, and I wasn't too sure. If you look real carefully, you can see a bunch of little flowers starting to develop. And now I'm thinking this is actually 4 o'clocks. So we'll see how that develops. If it does, it'd be nice to have some color in there. Also, we have more plants sprouting. In fact, there's even one way down here, which might actually be the moonflower that I've been waiting for. So I'm happy about that. I need to actually put this piece here back up where it goes. Hope you can see that. I don't know if you saw that at all. Anyway, that's it for this planter. The sole zinnia that I have actually flowering is doing very nicely. And the petunias over in this planter are doing nicely, and I think that's about all the real changes around here. Over by the pergola, the sprouts that have been coming up are getting bigger. Sorry, I've got sirens behind me. But that's, I think, about it in terms of updates, and I think I'll wrap up this episode here, and we'll see what I can get going tomorrow, and that'll show up in the next episode. So this is the Budget Gardener signing off, saying have a great week, and may your thumb be green.